Chapter 24. 6 months after Muhammad died, the coup that most Nigerians were expecting came to pass. All across the nation, heavy glass frames were taken down from walls, and pictures of the president were updated. Out came the man in white civilian robes, and back went the green military fatigues. White and green, Nigeria's colors. This routine was well known by now, and would grow all too dismally familiar for Nigeria in the years to come, but at first people celebrated the return of a strong military that promised to stamp out corruption. At that time, anything promised to be an improvement on the nation's failed experiment with democracy. However, soon the optimism vanished and university students took to the streets in protest. Months turned into a year and, with each successive wave of discontent, students demonstrated, campuses were closed, people were arrested, and some died during the protests. Many professors tried to stay out of the fray, but Teo empathized with his students and refused to be intimidated. He vowed to himself that as long as he lived, he would work to make things better, even if it meant giving clandestine assistance to student activists, which he did when students wanted explanations for controversial government policies. Armed with Teo's notes, they wrote convincing arguments against government plans, printed them on flyers and plastered them all over campus. For Teo, it became a surreal existence, leaving no time to focus on his academic research. His days were spent either with his students or in his office preparing documents, such as the one he was working on now for a British Council conference. The theme of the conference was the future of Nigerian universities, and their message Teo wished to convey was simple: universities were collapsing and urgent help was needed from the government. The problem, however, was how to frame the message such a way as to be taken seriously by government officials as well as by donor agencies likely to be in attendance. Teo was tired of walking a diplomatic tightrope in front of his nation's army officers, many of whom were half his age, but what else could he do? If the army officials perceived that he was criticizing them, Teo knew they could become recalcitrant, and little progress would be made, not to speak of the possible personal danger it might put him in. And so, without explicitly allocating blame, he intended to address the real and potential damage brought to a nation's economy by dysfunctional universities. He placed the lid on his fountain pen, squeezed it shut, and stood up ready to rehearse his speech, when he heard a knock. It was Miriam, and yes, he was busy, but how could he admit this when he had already exceeded his allotted time in the study? "Look at you," he exclaimed, admiring the results of what he knew had taken several hours in the salon. "You look beautiful, my darling." The fine black braids hung in a perfect semicircle around the back and sides of her head. He thought of taking her to Hill Station for a special meal and a romantic, cooking tonight. "I'm taking you out night." But before he could say any more, she was asking him if he knew who else had decided to leave the country. Who? Teo inquired cautiously, knowing that with each new departure, Miriam became more convinced that they should also leave. "The Gordons." "Really? Is this to go and look after her parents?" "No. She has sisters in England. Maybe her siblings aren't too responsible," he replied, tapping the desk impatiently with his notes. "Even Quem is leaving, Teo." "Well, I always suspected he was bogus, always running away from problems," Teo replied, not meaning what he said but the direction of Miriam's conversation irritated him, and he didn't like her using others' names to try to change his mind. Teo, all our friends are leaving. The Adi whales, the Wisemans, the Shahs. Even your beloved writers, Soyinka and Akib, have left. Everyone is going, yet. Still we stay. Why? She stepped away from the door and stood straight. He shook his head, quietly placing his notes back on the desk. Why now? Miriam. He thought. It was an important speech. Why couldn't she just allow him to finish it? In the old days, Miriam used to listen to him, she had looked up to him, trusted his judgment, but not now. Oh Mateo, look, just go and look in the kitchen. There's no rice, no bread, no eggs, no sugar. Miriam spoke quickly, rapidly ticking off the items, one by one, on her fingers. There's nothing. Nothing. You can't even teach because of rioting and strikes. Miriam, please, he said, watching as she raised her hands above her head in a gesture of despair. We've discussed this so many times before. Times are hard, but we can't all run away. It's not just the students. I also have responsibilities to the union. And responsibilities to us? What of your responsibilities to your wife? To your child? To our relatives? She did not mention her nephews by name, but he knew what she was thinking. It was one of those issues that they would never resolve. He felt that he was doing all he could to support both extended families as well as so many of his students, but she didn't see it this way and wouldn't let him finish explaining. The hospital hasn't paid me for months, she interrupted, and you? When did the university last pay you? When was the last time lecturers received a airy? When was the last time you were given a sabbatical, or even a little money to present work at your beloved international conferences? But it's not about pay. He struggled not to raise his voice against hers. Isn't it? So when are you going to start driving a taxi or selling dodo and Gary in the market just like your colleagues in order to support us? And what happens when Kemi's school is closed? All the time you're thinking only of your students or the past. Teo brought his fingers to his temples. The nagging and shouting was like a scene from television, straight out of Village Headmaster. Why couldn't they just have calm, reasoned discussions? Miriam, you know it won't come to this. You know that the money from books provides for us. And that's supposed to last forever? Oh Mateo, why can't we move? Just for a short time at least, until Kemi is settled. You could be writing abroad, teaching abroad. You would even influence things here at home more by being out of the country, but you get so obsessed, as though you're married to this cause. Miriam, I can't go yet, not yet. Look, I'm trying to write this speech, to show the government what has happened to the universities. Everything is crumbling and this is our last chance. We can't let our country sink into utter self-destruction. It's our last chance, don't you see? Just look at the universities. Ever since 1974 the budget for higher education has fallen, yet the number of universities has been expanding. Is it any wonder that? Why? She interrupted. Why? Because they're following IMF guidelines and I'm not talking about that. I don't care about IMF, World Bank, whatever. All I want to know is why can't you move? Remember what you said when Buhari came to power. What did he achieve? Miriam always had to bring it to this, the drama and the shouting. It was a bloodless coup, Miriam, and a successful war against indiscipline. You remember how the neighborhoods were clean, people queued up in an orderly fashion and arrived at work on time, and Oh Mateo. What are you talking about? Just listen to me. I'm not your student. I don't care about that. Well, you should care, and anyway you asked the question. What question? I didn't ask you to tell me about Bahari. Yes you did, Teo sighed, thinking that she would soon start crying too. Make him feel guilty. I asked you why you couldn't leave this place. Miriam, how can you expect me to walk away from everything, my work, my students, our country, and establish myself abroad? Why not? She shouted, clasping her hands above the braids and squeezing her face between her elbows. Teo shut his eyes, and in that moment despised her. Look, I belong here, Miriam. These are the things I care about and must fight for. I don't have any other choice. And you think Babangida is suddenly going to change his mind on the adjustment program? Miriam let go of her head and shook her hands angrily in the air. No, but I'm more useful here than abroad. Everyone is running away, I can't also run. And you believe these military men won't touch you because you're a professor, chair of history, and big Oxford man? Look at what they did to Dil. Jiwa. Miriam, please, he begged, walking towards her. No, don't touch me. Don't touch me. There's nothing here. We're wasting our time. And if we'd left earlier we wouldn't have lost the baby. Miriam. He pulled her gently towards him to stop her crying. Don't know that. She too had heard the doctors say that the chances for such a premature baby would have been slim anywhere in the world. Still, she insisted that Cesta First World equipment would have saved the child. At the very least she had argued, had she not been living under so much daily stress she would not have gone into early labor. He stroked her arms and kissed her gently on her forehead. You've never been good at moving, she sighed, pulling away. And with that, Miriam rubbed out all the goodwill and love that had been so hard for him to show in the first place. Had he not relocated to Jos because she was eager to come here? It was Miriam who argued that Jos would be better for the family, a more temperate climate than Ibadan, a good international school for Kemi, and on and on and on. Moving had not been his choice. But I did move, for you, didn't I? You make it sound like a sacrifice. Damn you, Miriam. I've always sacrificed for you from the very beginning. Have you forgotten who stuck with you when you fell pregnant? I didn't blame you and I didn't leave you when you lost the baby. So don't talk to me about sacrifices. Well, if that's how you feel. Miriam, look, I'm sorry, I just. But before he had finished, she had slammed the door, and his neat stack of notes flew up and scattered. One sheet escaped and fluttered off the desk, skimming his bare foot. He reached down for it and shook off the coating of harmat and dust. How was he supposed to concentrate now? He scrunched the sheet of paper into a ball and tossed it angrily at their door. What was wrong with the woman? Wasn't it good enough that he had promised to stay for another year? Why did it always have to be so difficult?